Hey guys, it's Bailey. Welcome back to the channel and thanks for tuning in to today's video, which is going to be about some of the products, 3 products exactly, that I picked up in the Sephora VIB sale. Even though I said, I was like, in my initial recommendations video that I'll link below, I said, oh, it's so surprising, I don't have any makeup in my cart. Well, give me enough time on the website and a few makeup items intrigued me, and so I picked some up, and because there are like these rolling waves of VIB sales, I wanted to be sure and review them as quickly as I could and at least get some preliminary thoughts out there so that in case you're considering picking some of these items up from the sale, you have a little bit more information, can see them on, how they perform, all that kind of good stuff. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first thing I picked up is the Natasha Denona Gold palette, and this I really waffled over. When I first saw it, I kind of thought this was one of the more underwhelming palettes from Natasha Denona, but as with so many makeup brands these days, their Instagram is crushing it. Both hers and Pat McGrath's are some of my favorite beauty Instagrams to follow because they not only show the products and swatches and like all the nitty-gritty of the product, but they show demos too and tutorials, which I find so useful and even inspirational. If you don't have the exact product they're talking about, you can kind of fake it. So at the very least, it's education and it's also beautiful. Needless to say, I picked this guy up and I really like it. So to take you through the palette, it's obviously heavily influenced by gold, but there are lots of different takes on gold here. You have everything from a gold duochrome green that actually, as I see it now, has like a purple shift to it up here in the corner. And by the way, there is this with all the names. So that shade that I'm referring to is called Lime Chrome, but like I said, at some angles, it even has a pink shift to it. So it's super multifaceted. There is this matte, deep teal color, and it's a very wearable teal. It's not too blue leaning, which I feel like on some skin tones and eye tones can look a little too over the top blue. This is very toned down, more green leaning, deeper, smokier teal or turquoise shade, and it's incredibly pigmented. Then there is a gold reflex shade. There are more yellow mustard leaning golds, warm golds, cool golds, bronzes. There's just a little bit of, and then obviously the darker caramely browns here too, in case you want to just go all in on the neutrals and less on the too colorful shades in here. You have that option as well, and I was just really impressed with how multifaceted they made this palette while still in keeping with the monochromatic gold theme. You have enough versatility that you could branch out into a look using these turquoises, which by the way, I was wearing in my October favorites video, and a lot of you guys were asking for a tutorial, and I did film it, but I didn't do the whole shebang where it's like my face and the full, like the rest of my face. So what I'm going to do instead is do a pictorial kind of thing where I basically do a step-by-step of pictures in kind of a long form pin format, and you can check that out if you sign up for my weekly newsletter, which has been less weekly as of late, but I'm really working on getting it to be more regular. So if you want to see how I created that look using this palette, go ahead and sign up for that. I'll put the link in the description bar below. But back to the palette, it's great. If you're feeling the gold tones going into fall and winter, this is a great way to get them all in, lots of different kinds. And the shadow quality is amazing and across the board with all these shades. My one thing is just in the lack of diversity in the matte shades. Surprisingly, they're great quality, but I do feel like at least 3 of these here, there could have been a little bit more of an undertone shift or perhaps a depth shift. There's not really anything super light in here for like a brow bone highlight, so maybe something like that. I just think something more could have been done with 2 of those 3 shades because it's absolutely an essential shade, but especially on the eye, they all look pretty much the same, and I just don't need that much of that shade in my life. So that's the one thing that I might tweak if I'd have done it differently, but if it's a shade you know you'll love and use, you have a lot of it in this palette if you're interested. Then I also picked up the Huda Beauty Nude palette. This was another one I really wasn't interested in because it, maybe it was the name was a turn off, like another nude palette, and yet here I sit with this guy, which is full of golds and nudes. But yeah, I just didn't feel like this is something I really needed, but the more I looked at it, I realized first off, this is not nude. It really is blushes and berries. And then what I really didn't appreciate until I actually got it here was that there are these shades with speckles in them. And when I first saw these on the Sephora website, they didn't come across as speckles. It looked like they almost put like star graphics in the powders to show that they were like glittery or shimmery or something like that. But sure enough, got it home, there are like pockets of shimmery pearlescent pigments swimming around in 4 of these shades that they are calling multi-reflective shadows. There are 4 of those shades in here, a ton of beautiful beautiful buttery mattes, 2 glitter shades, and then this one kinky on the end, which they are calling a pressed pearl. It's really what I would consider just like a strong shimmer shade. Not really glittery, especially in comparison to the actual glitters in here, but more of a ultra finely milled shimmer. And then another surprise when I got this is there is a cream concealer in here, right here in the corner, meant to be used as a priming concealer base underneath all of these shadows. And so I thought that was really interesting. TBD on whether or not fallout will absolutely ruin that thing quickly, because there's nothing to protect this cream product over here amongst all of these powders. So especially with glitter and especially in Huda Beauty palettes, I love them. I'm actually a fan of her textured shadows. Back when her first eyeshadow palette launched, I loved those. So I don't mind them by any means, and I accept that there might be some fallout that comes with them. But then you put a cream product in the mix and it makes me a little nervous. So I know there are some hacks people have shared out there. I'm kind of the mindset where if you're paying this much for a palette, there should be some thought into how you keep the two separated. So far I've used this only twice at this point, but still I kind of expected it to be pretty immediate that powder would get in here, and there's still nothing in there. So far so good, but just something to think about, because that was something that I just had no idea there was a cream product in this palette. So like I said, I have used this in 2 looks. The one that I was wearing in yesterday's video, which is a review of the new ColourPop stick foundations. And in that video, I was wearing the concealer as a base. I found that I prefer to use my finger to apply it all over my lid. And something to quick note while we're talking about it is that while I appreciate it's in here and I have noticed that it does a good job at really clinging onto those shadows, and I haven't experienced any creasing so far, I wish it had been more of a sheer base, because it's going to leave a white cast on anyone with medium to deep skin tones. I noticed that it's a tad too light for my skin, and especially with the way I like to build it up to cancel out any pigmentation, because I have, you know, like capillary veining coming through on my eyelids that I like to cancel out with a concealer slash eye primer. And someone with a medium to deep skin tone isn't, I mean, this obviously is not going to match their skin tone. So I wish there maybe would have been a separate row of those kinds of concealer shades, or just something a little bit different in here that catered to a wider range of skin tones. But back to that tutorial. So I primed the concealer, then I went in with the shade Teddy over here in the corner as my crease shade, ran that through the crease, was pretty impressed with how pigmented that shade was. Then I couldn't stop myself. I had to go in with one of those multi-chromal, that's what they're called? Multi-reflective shadows. I will remember it at some point. I went in with the multi-reflective shadow called Crave, which is the lightest of them up here. And it has a combination of champagne and green and white frost. And it's just, all of these are so multifaceted. Really, really gorgeous. That I applied in my inner corner just with my finger. You could use a brush, but I really love the way that these layer up when you use your finger. And then after that, I went in with the shade Excite, which is this crimson glitter right here. It's a pretty straight tone crimson glitter, especially when you compare it to Infatuated, which is, again, a little bit more multifaceted with shades of green and crimson and bronze and things like that. So I just went in with that crimson glitter and applied that to the outer half of my eye, and then kind of blended the two, the glitter and Crave, together just to make sure there weren't any harsh lines around there. And that is it. That's all I used to create that look. And then for today's look, again, primed with that concealer shade, and I went in with the shade Secret in my crease because I realized I hadn't used any of the powders really close to this concealer shade, so thought I'd dip in there, see what the fallout situation was like, to see just how risky it would be to kind of keep that concealer uncovered, and it really wasn't bad. Like I said, still free and clear. So that is what I used in my crease, which ended up being a lot more pink than I anticipated given how it looks in the pan. These are super pigmented, so maybe over a different base, maybe a less sticky or creamy base, it would have looked a little bit differently, but just know I did see that transformation. And then across the lid, I went in with the matte purple shade Love Bite up here, patted that all over my lid. Actually, I think I did it differently. I did this eye first, and then once I filmed it, I reversed that order. So I went in with Love Bite first, all over my lid, then went in with that crease shade second, then went back to Crave because I love it so much, applied that in my inner corner, and then I used my finger to take Kinky, which is the one shimmer shade in this palette, and I just used to pat that all over my lid. Oh, I didn't stop there. I did do one more thing because I just couldn't stop. I took another one of those multi-chromal shades called Charmed, and I patted that in the center of my lid. I didn't notice it made a huge difference. I probably should have gone with a slightly lighter shade to give that, you know, strong spotlight effect, but it definitely made the look a little bit more dimensional, a little bit more multifaceted, and overall a really pretty look. So those are the two looks I created, and it's a pretty limited experience. I do like to test products a little bit more than that before I finally give a review, but just from a rough first impressions perspective, I do like how this is performed. The one thing I'm not really confident on to speak to just yet is just how long I can wear this without the shadows creasing. I wore it for 5 hours yesterday the first time I wore it, and I didn't notice any fading or creasing, but I personally like my primers to make my shadows last all day, like 12 hours plus. So I haven't put it to that kind of test, just as a disclaimer here, but from what I have tried of this guy, I really, really like this. And to the extent that this concealer, you know, primer shade doesn't work for you, you still have a palette full of shadows that are perfectly good regardless of the primer you wear. Now on to the last product. This guy really intrigued me. It's from the brand Trèstique, which I haven't purchased anything from in the longest time. I did kind of a big haul when I first discovered them in my Ipsy bag and really enjoyed them as a brand, but they just, again, people are launching things left and right. I'm trying new products like crazy, and so they've just fallen by the wayside. But this really got me interested. Basically, it is a pressed powder highlight in a stick format, because that's Trèstique's thing, is it's entirely stick makeup. And this one specifically, it's called the All Over Starlighter Powder Stick, and there are two shades. I picked up the one called Ultraviolet, but there is one that is more of a champagne-y, like what I would consider maybe more of a traditional highlight shade. But I have so many of those, I thought, why not play it, like, just take a little risk. Plus, you know me, if you've seen my How I Like to Highlight video, you know I really enjoy using more colorful highlighters just to add a little bit of dimension to my look. And in fact, I'm not wearing any highlight today, so let's just go for it. Like I said, it's called a powder highlighter, so I really wasn't sure what to expect, but it feels, I mean, just like that, like a powder highlight on your skin, but you're applying it in a stick format. You can see it's very pigmented, and because it's not a cream, you don't have to really worry about how long you have to work with it. It'll pretty much blend out no matter what. However, I do find that because it's a powder, it's a little bit more prone to a stronger white cast as a result. Like you can see it a little bit goes a long way, and so I really have to blend out to make sure that I'm looking more at a highlight and not at like an opaque film of purple tinted frosty highlight across my skin. But once it's blended out, it gives this really, really beautiful and interesting sheen to the skin that can be as intense or as soft as you want it to be. The other thing about this is because it's a powder, I noticed that it kind of blurs the texture of my skin, which might sound a little weird, but sometimes I find with creams they can emphasize because it gives you that like a wet look or like a glossy look to the skin. It can sometimes emphasize texture that I have, and so in a really interesting turn of events, this one doesn't, which will be especially good for people who feel like they can't wear highlighter up in this area, which is where I love to apply it. But so often I get questions about what do I do if I have texture and highlight's only going to emphasize that texture. This might be a good sort of option for you if you're interested in trying this technique, just because, like I said, as a powder, I really feel like it not only doesn't emphasize them, but almost hides some of that texture up there. And then the other thing that they said you could do on their Instagram, but I have not tried yet, is to apply this wet. I can't remember if they recommended dampening the skin beforehand with like a setting spray, or I can't imagine they want you to wet the actual product, but they do say that it's a wet dry product, so you can apply it wet for more intensity. I'm pretty pleased with this intensity though. I really don't need any more, but if you want to, just know that you could. I'm always so scared to put this anywhere other than this area because I'm a little nervous I'm gonna look like I have a purple nose all day, but we're gonna go for it. So overall, I really like this. I like the idea of it especially, and I love the purple tone that this has to it. The one thing I don't think I'm crazy about is the amount of product you get. Now keep in mind, this does twist up so that you do get more than meets the eye. Like a teeny tiny little bit will twist up as you go through and use the product, but you get 1.2 7.5 grams of product in this for $18, whereas in a Becca highlight, you get 7 grams of product in one of these. In fact, this one is actually really close. I can't believe I just pulled this out as a comparison. Let me see how they look together. Because this is this is the shade Prismatic Amethyst. Very similar, little bit pinker leaning as compared to the Trèstique, but when you're comparing them side by side, you get way more product out of the Becca as opposed to the Trèstique. They're slightly different textures. I would say the Trèstique is a little bit more forgiving on the skin texture than Becca is, just because the shimmer is a lot more finely milled, if you can believe it, because I feel like Becca used to be the highlighter to go to for finely milled highlight, but even this looks a little bit more shimmery in comparison to the Trèstique. So just something to weigh. I recommend, if you can find it in store, I don't know if it's an online exclusive at Sephora, but if you can find the Trèstique in store, recommend you go check it out just to get a feel for it, see if you like the format, and then if you think it's better than something like a Becca or another one of a highlighter you prefer, then give it a try, because I really like it. Alrighty, that is it. It has to be it, because I don't think I've talked so long about so few products, but there was just a lot that I want to talk about. So hopefully all of it was useful information for you. Again, especially if these were products you were interested in with the upcoming VIB sales. Let me know if you have any other questions down in the comments below. Besides that, guys, really hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye, guys.